Hello again, and welcome to Strategies for Living with international speaker and author Doug Sparks. In this episode, Doug will be discussing what our response should be to the postmodern world. And now, here's Doug.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. The last several sessions, we've been looking at postmodernity, where it came from, what it is, where it's going. But the real point and desire that I have in doing this podcast is not talking about postmodernity. It's talking about you as an individual and encouraging you to take part in being part of the process of answering the questions and the situation that postmodernity is presenting for us. And in my opinion, in order for this to turn out well, it's going to take every one of you and your generation to step up, take responsibility, be a good citizen, an active member of society, and bring something better as a result of this sort of cataclysmic event that happens philosophically, which in a way really, I wouldn't say threatens, that might be a harsher word, but it's moving into the unknown. It's moving into the uncharted waters. And unless there's a whole group, a whole generation or generations of people, young people who are willing to step forward and embrace life and take on responsibility and make a difference, then there's no telling what this thing's going to turn into. If there are people like that who are willing to do it, then this could be an opportunity to make it a much, much better world, a much better place to live. But my point is, it's not just going to happen. It is going to take action on your part to be able to be that individual who steps forward and makes a difference in life. And so many times we all have heard and read stories about one individual who takes a stand and it changes the whole course of history. One of my heroes is Nelson Mandela. I've been to South Africa many times. I've actually been on Robben's Island, where he was incarcerated for, I think, 17 of his 29 years. And I've actually stood in his cell block where he was imprisoned. And it was about, I'm guessing, 6 feet long, maybe 7 by 4 feet wide. And the only thing that was in there was a little mattress, and that was it. 17 years he spent in that place. And when he came out, I mean, nobody gave him a chance of changing the course of history. One man, but in his time of imprisonment, he developed such a strong sense of who he was and strength of character and strength of his personality that when he got out, he literally changed the course of history, not only in South Africa, but around the world. And he did it through one man standing up and saying, no, this is wrong. No, this is not going to happen. This is not the right way to, this is unjust. And as a consequence, the whole world shifted around him. Now, hopefully we don't have to spend 20 some years in prison in order to develop that strength of character. But take on the little things that you can handle. For example, Mandela in prison, and I'm trying to get the story right, at something like this, there was an inequity because I believe it was white prisoners could wear long pants, but black prisoners could only wear short pants. And he thought that was unjust. And so he took that on as one of his, thing. This isn't right. We need to do something. And he, I think he went on a fasting time and protest, and he kept writing petitions. And well, after a while, they said, okay, yeah, you can wear long pants like the white guys do. Everybody thought, well, that's such a small little thing. That's crazy. It doesn't amount to anything. Well, it does, because that was one of the building blocks in his character, that he was willing to stand up for something that helped him when he got out of prison to change his entire nation. And so what I want to talk to you for a little bit today as we move on, because the main sort of title of what we're pushing for is not only what is postmodernism, but kind of the subtitle is how to orient yourself in the postmodern world. Because as I've talked about, a lot of the foundations have been either pulled out from under us, or it's become confusing. We become disoriented. And so I'd like to help you get to the place when you can reorient yourself, allow your life to be meaningful and have a consequence. And it's possible. You can have a future, you can have a hope, you can make a difference in the world, but it's going to take some effort. It doesn't just happen. And so the first thing I want to talk to you about is a very simple question at one level. Who are you? And I think, well, that's pretty easy. Who am I? Well, and then you'll give me your name. And I'm going, well, that's nice, but that's not who you are. That's what people call you. Who are you? You say, well, I'm a teacher, or I'm a plumber, I'm a mechanic, I'm a student. I'm going, no, that's what you do. I want to know who you are. And you go, well, I'm not sure. Well, guess what? You're not alone. A lot of people have no idea who they are. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward, and this is what happens. As I talked earlier about, as you enter into the world in a rather unglorious way, shall we say, a little bit messy, as it were. And so you start out life, and as we talked about, you begin to get aware of yourself and aware of others, and you have this thing called consciousness. And now some people argue that girls become conscious much earlier than boys. And some would argue that men never really come fully conscious. They're still trying to figure out what the heck's going on, which is probably not too far from the truth. But anyway, to whatever degree of consciousness males can do it, we're a little foggy at best. But girls oftentimes are really much more aware of their surroundings. As I mentioned, a lot of times being aware of your surroundings is not necessarily a good thing. People say things about you that hurt you. People do things to you, bullying and that sort of thing that hurt you. You might be abused, whether that's verbally or physically or sexually, and that is a trauma. That it really hurts you. And so what you end up doing is your real self goes into hiding because you don't want to be hurt any further. And so what you end up doing is the real self goes into hiding, and you create a false persona. Now the word persona comes from the Greek word which means mask. And so that's what we end up doing. We carry these masks around with us, and depending on the situation, we've got our happy face mask, we've got our contemplative mask, and we've got all these different masks that we wear, but the real you has gone into hiding, and now all that you present is the false, the fake, the temporary, the shallow you. And you can tell sometimes because people ask you, well, tell me, how are you doing? Oh, wow, yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Wife's doing well. Kids are, they're good. And job's going, yeah, not bad. And yeah, we're doing good. And then if it was the real you that was speaking, it might be more like, man, I am so insecure. I'm fearful. I'm afraid my wife's going to leave me. My kids are a mess. this life sucks. I hate everything. But you never say that because you don't want to be rejected. You don't want to be further ostracized because you already feel ostracized as bad as it is, and you don't want to make it any worse. And so that really, really complicates things because it's the real you that has to deal with issues. The false you can never deal with the real issues of your life. If you've had abuse in your life, your false self is going to cover it over. It's going to say, wasn't that big of a deal? The real you, the one that's really hurting and carrying the trauma around, will still be there. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it's the real you that's connected to your brain. And it's your brain that decides how you feel. And if you've got all these negative emotions inside, your brain is the one that figures out something's not right. And as long as something's not right, it will not let it go. Psychologists tell us this: if you have an issue in your life that is older than, say, 18 months, and it still is with you consciously, and you still, at moments and times in your life, it keeps coming back, flooding back into your memory, then that's a pretty good sign that that's an issue that has not been resolved. And oh, by the way, you can't outrun it, you can't ignore it, you can't throw enough drugs at it or alcohol at it. Well, you can try, but it doesn't help because your brain never, ever forgets. Your body even doesn't forget. There's several books out there that from scientists and doctors and things about how the body carries the hurts. The body, even the individual cells, carry those hurts. And so the only way that we can get free, to move forward, and by here I'm talking about real freedom, not the political freedom, but real freedom, is to bring your hiding self out into the public eye. And oh, by the way, that is an excruciatingly difficult process. It requires a tremendous amount of personal courage to do it. Now, one of my favorite organizations in the entire world are the 12-step programs, the Alcoholics Anonymous programs. Because what they do, and I love recovering alcoholics. Those people are in most cases, are the most honest, real people that you ever want to be around. They're some of my best friends. I love them. And I remember one time I was back in the States, and I was in a little town called Truckee, California, up by Tahoe. And a buddy of mine, I forget what it was, he said, "Hey, I'm going to an AA meeting. You want to go with me?" And I'm going, yeah, that sounds interesting. And when I got there, now, first of all, just to look at him, now this probably was how can I say it, a lower economic scale of people that we were in this one in Truckee, California. It wasn't the top end, shall we say. So it was a pretty rough looking crowd. I mean, these guys, teeth missing and all kinds of things. If you just looked at them, you'd think, oh my gosh. But man, when you sat down and started talking to them and heard their stories, the raw courage of saying, you know what, man, I'm an alcoholic. I've messed up my life. I've taken responsibility. And you hear their story, and it's just this raw honesty. There was something that was so appealing about that. I was drawn to these guys. I thought, I like these guys. This is the kind of person I want. I'd rather be around this guy than somebody who doesn't have any problems, doesn't have any difficulties in life. I've got life figured out. Blah 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 blah. Trust me. No, and I'm sure you know people. You look at their lives and you think, oh my gosh, they have the perfect life. Look at that. They've got money. They've got a wonderful family. they've got a nice home, they've got beautiful cars, they've got, they dress well, on and on. That is the perfect family. Well, trust me on this, you don't have to scratch very far under the surface to find out, hey, maybe they are. I doubt it, but maybe they are. Oftentimes there's tremendous dysfunctionality. They're not happy, and we all understand how they did it, that possessions and things and money never make you happy. And that's a truism, because the people that look the happiest oftentimes are the most miserable. I heard one time a great definition for a dysfunctional family is a family that has people in it. Because anytime you got a person that's going to have some level of dysfunctionality going on. And so don't look and say, well, those people are perfect, I could never do that. Well, you don't have to do that. What you need to do is try to be honest and look at yourself and I would say this, find somebody. Now, if you can afford it, it might be a therapist. If you can't afford it, it might be a friend. It might be a teacher. It might be a coach. It might be somebody that you can trust, somebody of the clergy. It might be people. You've got to find somebody that you can talk to and tell them what's really going on inside of you. And I know the fear. The fear is if people know who I really am, they're not going to like me. Well, that is a lie. Usually the people that people don't like are the fake ones. The ones that people really love are like the 12-step, the recovering alcoholics, who are just brutally honest about who they are, and they really do get tremendous acceptance from just about everybody. Nobody judges them because they're already saying, hey, I'm not trying to pretend to be anything. This is who I am. This is what I've done. And one of the interesting things about alcoholics, about the 12-step program, is that one of the things, the very start of it is this. You have to say, I'm an alcoholic. That sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? Sometimes it takes 20, 30, 40 years before somebody's willing to say, you know what, I'm an alcoholic and I have a problem. I remember one of my really good friends when we were living up in the mountains here in Colorado in a little town called Gunnison. One of my best buddies was in AA. And we were at a party one night, and somebody came up to him and said, oh, can you please help me? My husband's an alcoholic, and I've been hiding all the liquor, and I'm doing all, and my friend says to her, oh, what you need to do is buy him a drink. She goes, what? And he said, yeah, buy him a drink, because you're just enabling him. Give him don't hide the liquor, put it out. If he wants to buy a drink, buy him a drink, because until he hits bottom and he sees that he has to change, you're never going to change it. No way. So don't, this is not your problem, it's his, and you're just enabling him. So let him go. Now, that sounds rather harsh. When I first heard it, I thought, wow, that's tough love. But when you think about it, it's true. You will never change anything about you as long as somebody else is trying to impose it on you. You'll change your attitude or maybe change your behavior because you don't want to get some negative consequence from your parents, like your car taken away or whatever. But you're never going to change until you, in your heart, on your own, say, I need to change. Something in me has to change, and I want to make that change. So what happens is when you get to that point and you start discovering who you really are, you need to interpret that on a couple of different levels, okay? First of all, probably in terms of physical appearance and that type of thing, you're probably 98% genetically produced. In other words, it is the genetics of your parents that form in a certain way, and you are genetically predisposed to certain things. So there's not a lot you can do about your height. There's not a lot you can do about the color of your eyes, the color of your hair, or if you have no hair, there's not much you can do about whether you're left-handed or right-handed. There's so many things that you are just born with. And those are the things that you have to visibly, consciously say, I am going to accept my physical appearance for what it is. Now, that being said, I would encourage you to change what you can. I mean, if there's some obvious impediment that can be corrected by, some kind of procedure or whatever, then yeah, that's fine. You can encourage yourself. Be the best physical version of your person you can be. And I would say, from time to time, comb your hair, maybe change your clothes, all these kinds of things that just, make yourself presentable as best you can for the physical attributes that you do have. And don't try to be somebody else. And I know it's so hard, especially in the teenage years, because you're always comparing yourself to somebody else. That is a really bad strategy. Look yourself in the face in the morning, look at yourself and say, okay, that's me. That's the hand I was dealt, and I'm going to play this hand to the best of my ability. And the reason why is because I don't have a better strategy. That is the best strategy you have for being able to move ahead. Now, when we lived in the Middle East, we lived on the island of Cyprus for about 10 years, sorry. And one of the students that came to go through our Institute of Middle East Studies was a young girl from Egypt. And when she was young, she had gotten polio. And so the consequence of that was that one of her legs was abnormal, and that when she walked with quite a noticeable limp. And I don't know how many times she would come to me and we would talk, and she would say, "Oh, Doug, man, what do I do with this? I don't know if I can have surgery. I don't know, but it's a horrible thing." And I said, "Nadra, it is. It's the consequence of polio is absolutely catastrophic. There's no question about it. It's horrible. But you know what? At this point in time, there's nothing you can do about it. Unfortunately, I mean, I wish I could wave the magic wand and you would have a perfectly normal leg, but that's not going to happen. So as bitter and as hard as it is, you're going to have to say, you know what? This is the reality. This is the reality that I'm living with, and I'm going to have to embrace it, and I'm going to have to be the best version of my physical self I can possibly be and move forward." Now, I know that sounds tough, but guess what? There's not a better strategy, because the alternative is to get angry, to get bitter, to get resentful, and then you're only compounding the problem, because now not only do you have a physical issue, you're also going to have a deep, deep, deep emotional issue that goes on top of it. So first of all, know who you are and accept who you are on a physical basis. Change what you can. Now, the non-physical you is altogether different in many ways, because what we're talking about is your temperament and your character. Now, again, temperament is probably 90% or 95% genetically driven. And this is just simply the proclivities that you have in terms of your personality. So for some people, you're outgoing, you're extroverted, you're high energy. Other people are very low energy, they're conservative. Some people are adventurous, some people are very cautious. So we have this vast spectrum of temperaments. And again, those are things that you can't really change very much. You can manage them, you can control them to a degree, but by and large, that's what you're born with, and you are going to have to make the best of it. Now, the idea of temperaments is nothing new. It's been around from about 200 BC, a guy named Galen, who was a Greek physician. And he was a very observant sort of guy. And he noticed that people sort of personality-wise or temperament-wise kind of fell into, as he called, 4 basic categories. And so, he was talking about he said, some people are sanguine, some people are choleric, some people are melancholic, and other people are phlegmatic. Now, the sanguine people are the people that are optimistic and they're very social, kind of what we would call an extrovert. Choleric were irritable and short-tempered. They were like the hardcore charge-on personalities, the people that get stuff done, and they don't oppose to trample down people to get ahead. So those were the cholerics, so guys that push forward. Melancholic were a little more analytical. They were quiet. They liked to watch things. And then, of course, you had the phlegmatic, which was the relaxed guy, the person who was peaceful. He didn't have a lot of ambition or get up and go, but he was, very mellow. Now, that was 200 BC. So when we stop to look at it now, here we are, 2,700 later, 2,300 years later, we're looking at this and going, you know what? He was pretty doggone close. That was a pretty accurate representation of temperament types. But now, of course, being in a more sophisticated environment, we have a lot of ways of determining them. So I'm going to talk to you, we're going to wrap this up for now, but now in our next sessions, we're going to talk about how can you determine who you really are from the temperamental perspective, and then we'll go on and talk more about the personality that you have, the character issues, and using those then to orient yourself in a way that will give you the best chance to be successful in life. And it's possible. You can do it. And we can help. So hope you'll join us again next time. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time on Strategies for Living with Doug Sparks.